Hi, I'm Greg Lambert with the Geek in Review, and I'm here with our friend Nikki Shaver from Legal Technology Hub. And Nikki, I know the maps that you guys create are a constant upgrade, but you just released a new one. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right. Hi, Greg. Hi, everyone. So, we have been releasing our Gen AI in legal tech maps every quarter since actually February last year. Then we updated in March, and then every quarter since then. So, we released in early January, we released the latest one. The cutoff date for that was the end of December 2025. And it has 855 generative AI product placements by 682 vendors across 19 categories, which is obviously a massive landscape now. And in fact, back in March last year, I had said a year from now, we will have 1,000 products on this map. And I think we're well on track for that, interestingly. But now that we have a year's worth of these maps, it's really interesting to see some of the trends and some of those are worth calling out. So, first, the areas where we're seeing the most startup activity, that has changed over time. And in particular, this map shows a different type of activity than in the previous maps. So, for most of last year, AI legal assistant was really the hottest category, a ton of concentrated startup activity, new startups coming to market in that category. In December, interestingly, that had cooled a little bit and the hot concentration of startup activity had shifted over into operational tools for both law firms and legal departments. So, for example, think intake of both work and clients, and also to compliance and governance solutions. And this really tracks with what we're seeing in the market in terms of where firms are focused. And it also suggests that maybe new entrants are seeing the broad assistant category as being relatively settled right now and also quite crowded. So that's an interesting one to watch. The other thing I wanted to call out is we can really see, looking quarter to quarter over the past year, how the market is evolving. The growth trajectory has been incredibly consistent and steady, with about 100 companies added to the map every quarter. And so we include, if you go and look on Legal Tech Hub, www.legaltechnologyhub.com, you have our clickable map, which is the full map that you can click into every logo, explore the categories. We also have a graph that shows that trajectory. And it's just quite remarkable to see how steady it is, which is an indication that we haven't seen a slowdown in the market yet. Not at all. No sign yet of a bubble bursting or anything like that. So we look forward to continuing to track that this year, Greg.
All right. Well, good. My 401k is safe for at least one more year, right?
Yeah. Don't
All
take it
right.
from me.
Thank you, Nikki. Where can they go to learn more about this?
They can go to Legal Tech Hub. So do visit our website, legaltechnologyhub.com.
Thanks.
Welcome to the Geek in Review, the podcast focused on innovative and creative ideas in the legal industry. I'm Marlene Gaybauer.
And I'm Greg Lambert. And Marlene, usually when we talk about legal innovation or legal and AI, the conversation immediately drifts towards, the efficiency for big law or cost savings for corporate legal departments. But I think we're going to a little different this week.
Yeah, that's true. We are flipping the script this time. We're looking at innovation through the lens of survival, specifically how technology is being deployed on the front lines of housing courts and legal aid offices.
And we are joined this week by Sateesh Nori. Sateesh is a legal innovation strategist and a veteran of the access to justice fight. We love that around here. He has spent over 20 years in the trenches of the housing court, served on commissions regarding the homelessness problem, and is now helping to build the next generation of AI tools to close the justice gap.
Depositron, let me do that again. Satish challenges the industry to stop thinking about legal tech and start thinking about life-preserving tools. He is currently advising on projects like Law Answers AI and Depositron and teaches at NYU Law. Satish,
So, Satish, that's a heck of an intro and
yeah.
a big bar to match here. So, welcome to the Geek and Review.
Thank you guys. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here. I've been a longtime fan, so I'm really overjoyed to be with you today.
And I know
Thanks.
we have been trying for a while to get this together, so I'm glad that we were able to pull it off this time.
Yeah, mostly that was our fault, too.
It's true.
Oh, no, no fault.
So, Satish, your career path crosses legal aid, academia, innovation strategy, commissions on homelessness, and now AI. What were the hinge moments that pulled you towards this mix of advocacy and technology? And, what keeps you in the fight today?
That's such a great question. I like the way that you frame that, the hinge moments. For me, it's always been about trying to solve problems. That's why I became a lawyer, is to try to help ordinary people solve problems. Everyone wants to kind of look out for the little guy if we're really good people. When you see a little old lady crossing the street and her grocery bag breaks open and her groceries are all over the street, like most of us would stop and help pick up the groceries and get that person back across the street on their way home. And as lawyers, I think a lot of us feel that way, but we're trapped by the jobs that we have, the roles that we're in, and the systems that we work in. So for me, it wasn't about like hinge moments. It was just the big picture was always, how do I help people? And if I hadn't become a lawyer, my alternate path would have been to become an elementary school teacher, which I realized later on is a lot harder than being a lawyer. So I think I maybe lucked out there. So all the things that I've done were really along this kind of bigger path. That's why I was never afraid to venture outside of my skis, like lean out over my skis or think outside the box. Because for me, there was never really a box. It was just what I happened to be doing at the time and how I could fit that into the larger issue, which is like, why isn't the law more accessible to people? Why don't things just work? And I think the law is a great example of one of those problems. It just doesn't work that well.
I'm curious, as you were planning to go to law school, I know that's been a couple of years ago. What was there something either in your family dynamic or in your individual experience that was the motivator to go to law school to help people?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is I had to rebel against everything in my family. So my parents are doctors. My sister and her husband are now doctors. And sometimes I joke around that if at a family reunion, we could open up a small hospital. We have
Uh,
so many medical people in our field. And I kind of just pushed against that. I didn't want to study math and science. I was more interested in the arts and literature and politics, and I was on the debate team, big nerd in high school. And part of that was just to think about ways to convey ideas, to balance issues, to think about the pros and cons. That really interested me. And so the law just seemed like a natural fit. And then some of my kind of role models when I was growing up, I had to watch the movie Gandhi because it came out when I was, 7 or 8 years old. And the idea of Gandhi being a lawyer, I didn't know that until I watched that movie and I read about him later on. And he turned his kind of legal training on its head and said, let's adopt these principles that he drew from people like Ralph Waldo Emerson. And say, how can we logically frame things that are right and wrong and convince people of the right way to go forward? And then later on, I realized, these same ideas were adopted by Martin Luther King Jr. and, so many other people who are trying to use this idea of the rule of law, of justice, of due process. Fundamentally, it comes down to fairness, right? Some things are just not fair. We all know that to be true, but we close our eyes to it because it's too hard to deal with it, When you're just out in the world and you see unfairness, you're like, I wish I could help, but I got my own problems to deal with. And as lawyers, I think we should be those who help with these kinds of things. So that's really what drove me is to pursue this. But then there's also the other part of it, which is a more vain aspect, which is I just thought it would be fun to be a lawyer. I didn't know that most lawyers don't go to
Where
court.
did you get that idea?
I know. You
From
read like To
Gandhi.
Kill a Mockingbird and you watch, The Firm by John Grisham and you see all
Yep.
these movies and you're like, wow, being a lawyer is so cool. It's so
Exciting,
interesting.
right?
Yeah, you get to wear suits and you get to like go have these dramatic encounters in court. So I really wanted to do that. And actually, public interest lawyers do get to do that. Like we have no choice but to go to courts. But most lawyers don't do that kind of work. And that's really sad in some ways.
There was a recent Substack article that you wrote was really interesting, and a lot of us think of legal tech as this solution for access to justice, and you've been kind of pushing back on that a little bit, and I think rightfully so, to argue that these are really the life-preserving tools, not just apps that are lawyer-facing. What's the motivation behind that to write a Substack article that kind of puts that in everyone's face?
Yes. So, I've been in this space, believe it or not, for only a year and a half or so. And today happens to be the 1 year anniversary of the first legal AI tool I built with some friends. It's called Roxanne AI, and it helps tenants in New York City. It's a RAG bot. So simple now, but back then it was so hard to even get this thing out the door and get somebody to put it on a website. And so, being new to this space, I kind of saw where things were going. We all know that there's this huge AI bubble. We know that there's like 700 plus legal AI companies right now, and they're growing. And I noticed that like most of these companies center the lawyer, right? They take the things that we already do every day and they make them a little bit faster, a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient. And they're products, right? People are going to make a lot of money selling us these tools. But if you take a step back, and that's what I was trying to do, and look at the problem itself, helping lawyers work a little bit better isn't going to solve the access to justice gap, right? It's actually delivering help to people who are individuals, who are not lawyers, who have these problems. They have these life problems. They don't even know they need a lawyer. They don't even know where to go to seek legal redress, right? So I really thought, let's reframe this. Let's push back on this arms race that we're in to get all these toys together and to have our firm have more toys than the other firm, even though no one's really using any of them, or they don't know how to use it, or they're not willing to change the way that they work. And so that was my kind of idea there, is to like push back and say, let's not just center the lawyer, let's center the person with the problem. And there's this great quote from Henry Ford, which I overuse, which is, he said, if you ask people what they want, they're going to tell you they want faster horses because they can't even imagine the automobile. And that's where we're at, I think, in the legal tech space right now. Is like we're all thinking about faster horses. Like, oh, if only Word and Outlook worked better with AI and Lexis and Westlaw worked better with AI. Why do we even need that at all? Why can't we rethink the whole way we do legal research, or the way we file papers, or the way we even resolve disputes? Like, why are we even suing each other in the same way? Can't some of these things be resolved much earlier if there was another mechanism to do that? And maybe that's the way that technology should be used? I'm not sure if that's the answer, but I really want to push the envelope and make people think about this in a different way.
Yeah, kind of like reverse engineering it. Like,
Yeah.
here's what you ultimately want. Like, how
Yes.
should you do it as opposed to how do you do it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're a builder and you've been involved in building or advising on AI tools like Law Answers and Depositron. And you've talked publicly about, that chatbots can literally prevent homelessness. So as a builder, what core design principle do you insist on when building or advising on AI for vulnerable communities?
Yeah. Let me challenge your assumption in the question that I'm a builder. Sometimes
Okay.
I think
All
about
right.
it
Fair.
and I say, I couldn't even tell you how the internet really works. I can't tell you how this call over the internet with our video and voices really works, right? Like if you really pressed me, I can only tell you how it works in like general terms. And with AI, I'm the same way. Like sometimes I feel like an imposter. Like I talk about this stuff, but can I really explain it? And what I kind of reconciled for myself is it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. Like I think the thing that I bring is the idea and the experience as to how that idea could be applied in the real world. And then I got a lot of friends that I've made, like you guys and other people I've met at conferences, who can actually put that to paper and say, here's an MVP, here's a prototype. I like the idea. That's the part that I can't come up with because I haven't worked in the space like you have. But I know how the tech works. I know how to build a RAG bot. I know how to make sure that it's secure. I know how to make sure that it can, live on a website and connect to OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic or whatever, and so on. And so I've been really lucky to make some of these friends, like people at Joseph Legal and Tom Martin at LawDroid. And I can actually announce right now that I'm going to be joining Tom Martin as an employee of LawDroid. Today is my first day.
That's
So it's
great.
great to
Dropping here first,
announce
everybody.
that. Yeah, yeah, you heard it here first. And Tom helped me put Depositron out there, which is a vehicle to help people who've been unable to get their security deposits back from their landlords. And this is a problem I hear about all the time from friends, from relatives, from lawyers, from that dog, whose ever dog that is.
That's pod dog
Um,
Georgie.
yeah. Maybe Georgie's got a security deposit problem too. And so Depositron just helps you generate a letter from your phone and allows you to upload photographs. It's not even AI. The AI part comes into it if you want to ask questions about the law. Then it turns into a RAG bot and it can help you answer those questions. But a simple letter builder tool was unavailable to hundreds of thousands of people in New York City, where I live, who face this problem every year. And Back of the Napkin Math tells me that it's $100 million problem annually in New York City. $100 million of security deposit money is improperly withheld by landlords out of a total of $500 million that's collected. So even conservatively, we're giving landlords the benefit of the doubt that they do the right thing 80% of the time. 20% of that 500 million is $100 million. So it's ideas like this that I think are so easy to build, but you need the technical background, you need partners, and you got to take a risk in putting them out there, because the opponents to these things, believe it or not, are often lawyers and courts and judges and nonprofits like the ones I work at, who say, what are you doing here? You're cutting the lawyers out. They're essential. People can't do this on their own. And I say to that, why not? What's so special about us? We make mistakes. We're just flying blind sometimes. We're looking up the law as we go. What makes us so special and essential? Like, why can't people figure this stuff out on their own if it's easier to understand, if it's translated into their native language, if they can fill out forms and navigate the courts in their town much more easily, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it makes it easier. I mean, just something simple like, a letter generator.
Mhm.
We just recently had Judge Scott Schlegel on, and he was talking about this, about like,
Mhm.
I love the quote. It's like, that courts have to stop being the DMV. Sorry, DMV. But, can't we make some of these things more simple for people to just use and understand? Not necessarily cutting people out, just things that they wouldn't be doing anyway, just making it easier for people to do so that it's done the right way, and it saves everybody involved sort of the time and the hassle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what judges don't think about it that way. That's such a
I,
great
I
framing of
don't
it.
think we do. We
Yeah.
don't see the
Yeah,
court as a service.
yeah,
I will say, I think Richard Susskind stole that from the librarians who've been saying that probably since the turn of the
of course.
century. The
You're
library
right.
is a service, not a place, and the courts are now catching up to
Exactly
that.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So, Satisha, you said you've only been in the legal tech part for less than a couple of years, I guess, but you've been in the housing course for over 20 years. So, I want to see how you think that frontline experience that you've had over the years is helping you shape as we're looking at AI to do more and more. And think of the old adage of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So, in your experience, what is it that you think that AI should do, and more importantly, what are some things that you think it should not do when
Yeah,
it
that's a
comes to
great way.
the justice system?
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, I spent 20 years in the courts and working at legal aids in New York City, but I sometimes think I wasted 10 years. Like, I learned everything I needed to learn pretty early. And so one of the things I learned is that we will never be able to help everyone who needs our help. There will never be enough human beings There will never be enough funding to pay for those human beings. There will never be enough time in the day to do the things the way that we do them, like this one-on-one bespoke model. And so what I saw is like, I might have helped maybe 1,000 people in that 20-year time, but I probably turned away 10,000 people. And that's just immoral. Like, what kind of system exists in which you're turning away 80 to 90% of the people who desperately need your help? Imagine if an emergency room was turning away 90% of the people who came in with,
Right?
wounds and
You'd
diseases.
never get away with that.
Yeah, it would
Is
be
that,
like
I'm just
immoral.
wondering, is that a time issue? Is that a limitation on people issue?
All of
What
it.
is it that 90%
Yeah.
that gets turned away?
Yeah. So
Inefficiency. Yeah.
one of the
all of it.
reasons is that there's only so much time in the day, and the things that we do and the way that we do them are really time consuming. So intake is really time consuming. Determining eligibility is really time consuming. Understanding that someone comes to you with a problem that you can't help with, it's outside of the scope of your work. Understanding that they're ineligible for the funding that you receive for various reasons. And then dealing with the courts and the way they work and the welfare agencies and the public housing agencies. Everything is time consuming, paperwork intensive. We're still using fax machines in legal aid offices, to this day, because some of the other agencies that we work with only receive information through fax because no one's checking email and the phone message system is overloaded. And so everything takes time. And the other reason is that, when we do intake and triage, we have no idea what's coming. There's no good way for people to self-select out of the system because there's no good information available for them to do that. So everyone comes to the same entry point, whether we can help them or not. And that makes everyone's job harder. So imagine like in Queens, where I worked for 10 years, most recently, every day there are 50 to 75 people lined up outside our office door in the courthouse. And maybe we can help 10 of them. And maybe another 10 are just in the wrong building, but they don't know that because there's no good information. And maybe another 10 are too late. The problem's already occurred. It's months and months old. It's very difficult to undo that, and so on, right? Like, we can't sort these people properly and they can't sort themselves. So we waste so much time. And then what happens is, like, people in these kind of broken systems, they burn out. They're fatigued. They're demoralized because they're turning people away. They feel like they have blood on their hands when something bad happens to their clients or the people they couldn't help. And they quit or they just leave. And then we're training new people, and that's inefficient. And so you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
And so what I've learned is that, like, we've got to do this better. We've got to apply our expertise to the places that they're valued the most. Imagine a restaurant where the head chef is handing out the menus or ordering the meat and vegetables, right? Personally. That's not efficient. And yet the typical legal aid office or nonprofit, the managers are doing that work. They're filling in, they're answering phone calls, they're writing emails, they're doing all this work that's not really efficient and doesn't
Pulled in a million different directions.
Yeah. And so we got to get rid of that stuff. We got to focus on the stuff like the appeals. Like, this is something else that I wrote about, which is there's another justice gap other than the inability of people to get lawyers for their initial problems, which is that when it comes to appeals, there's almost no lawyers available because all the lawyers are doing that frontline stuff and they're burning out. And the appeals are the most important and interesting cases, right? Like, the law can actually change on appeal and impact a lot of other people in a similar situation. So we're all working backwards. We should all be doing the appeals as long as the people have viable ways to get their claims heard fairly in the first place. So these are some of the things I learned, and it just frustrated me to no end. Like, what am I doing? If I spent another 20 years, how much more impact would I have doing this thing in the same way that I've been doing it?
What are some things that you think that AI should not be
Of course,
seen as the answer for?
Yeah, I think, sometimes we think AI is a panacea. And, there's this idea that we'll have a robot lawyer who will be able to do anything and everything. And maybe that's true, right? Like we have self-driving cars and no one ever thought that was possible. And yet here we are today with these cars driving all over, LA and San Francisco and Phoenix and other places. And they're super fun. Like every time I can, and I'm in these places, I try to take one because I want to put my butt where my mouth is in talking about technology and what it can do. Literally, like put my butt in the seat of the car and like risk my life. And so I think there's a lot of hype for sure about what AI can do on the like extreme end, the technical end, the high end. And that's scary to a lot of people, right? Like, well, what if it gets it wrong? What if there are hallucinations? What if people are misled? We're doing harm to people if we use AI in a inappropriate setting. But I think that leaves a lot on the table. There's a lot of easy use cases, and those are the kinds of things that I'm working on, like Roxanne and Depositron and Law Answers. There's a lot of simple things that don't require a lot of compute that AI could have probably done 5 years ago if we had access to it back then. And we worry too much about the errors when 99% of the time it's getting it right. It's doing just fine. And so I think we got to focus on what are called high volume, low risk issues. And that's like intake and like giving people basic legal information and telling people where the courthouse is and helping people fill out that simple form for a name change or for a, custody issue or order protection, right? These things have real impact on people's lives, or filing a small claims case, right? Where you get your real money back in your hands and it's otherwise impossible to do that without a lawyer. There's so much on the table that we can kind of attack using AI tools, but this like fear, this idea that like lawyers are so special, nobody else can do this but us, I think we're hurting a lot more people by thinking that way. And so, yeah, there are risks with AI, but as lawyers, if we come to the table about any issue, we're going to highlight the risks first, right? That's what we're really good at. Why
That's what
not
we're
do it?
trained to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're trained to do. So we're the wrong people sometimes to think about these issues.
So, would those sort of high volume, low risk, I mean, if we were going to reverse engineer it, would that be where you would start if you wanted to redesign the justice system? I mean, I was listening to a podcast when I was walking the dog this morning, and
Uh,
it's Jennifer Leonard and Bridget McCormick, and I like their podcast quite a bit.
yeah, yeah,
And this was I'm a little behind, so I was listening to their 2026 prediction. And
yeah,
one of the things Bridget was talking about was having a AI moderator, sort of like a second or mediator rather, a second mediator who, and basically you'd sort of get a lot of the prep out of the way so that when the real mediator was there, like everything would sort of be done, and people would feel they were heard and that the way they were understood, and everything would be sort of set up nice, and then the mediator could focus on the actual case. So, I mean, is that the type of thing that you're thinking where we start? Or would it be, one of those more complicated things like the appeals process?
it's exactly that. In fact, I've been talking to Bridget and folks at the AAA about an idea I have called Claimsy. And Claimsy, it's a dumb name, but it's
But
basically
people
kind of,
remember it.
yeah,
Cla-
right, right. It
Claimsatron.
sticks. Yeah, Claimsatron.
Claimsatron. Claimsmatic.
That was plan B. But yeah, Claimsy could be a vehicle that helps ordinary people resolve disputes. So imagine if you and another person had a contract dispute over like someone was supposed to paint a fence and it didn't turn out right, or one party's not happy and they didn't pay the other party who did the work. And, otherwise you'd have to go to a small claims court or you have to hire lawyers. It gets more tense, it delays the situation, and everybody's unhappy, right? Win or lose at the end of like a year of litigation, you're going to be unhappy. So, what I've been thinking about with folks at AAA is what if we had an alternate dispute resolution system that's powered by AI? Like both parties could pay $10 each and say, I submit my evidence, you submit your evidence, we push this button, and 10 minutes later, we get a decision, like who's right, who's wrong. And maybe that's too far for people to accept. So maybe the decision aids a human judge, right? A human arbitrator. but it just expedites the process as you were describing. And something like that could exist as an app on a phone and be used thousands of times a day and would be self-sustaining, right? If 10,000 people paid $20 each to use something like this, that pays for the maintenance of it, the support, a human worker. And you can just imagine how it eases the burden on local courts who have to deal with these disputes and nobody's happy. And there's so much delay and the judges are like miserable because they don't want to hear about, a dog walker case or like a
One
dry
more dog
cleaning
walker
mistake
case.
or like, something like that, right? And so that's the kind of thing I think is so easy to build and conceive of. And the challenge comes in getting people to trust it, getting it to be incorporated into the existing systems. Like, why can't the courts adopt something like that? They can say, hey, you can file here, or you can use this little tool and you'll be done in days instead of months. And that could be a win for everybody involved, because I think what people really lack from the courts is closure. Like, win or lose, everyone feels like a loser sometimes, right? And
It's just the
that's
time
a
and
real
effort you put into
challenge.
it,
Yeah,
for small things.
exactly. Yeah. And the payoff is so minimal. And then you're frustrated, and then you're bitter, and then you hate this other party. And there's so many problems with that. And so I think people lose faith in our systems. So Claimsy
Yeah.
is a way to
Well,
like build that kind of thing.
I have an idea for you. You can call your mediator Judge Wapner, and then they could be interviewed by Doug Llewellyn, the AI version on the way out.
Exactly.
So
The People's Court, right? Or
Exactly.
Judge Judy
the
AI,
people's arbitration.
right? We could even put it on TV and people could
Okay,
watch, right?
there
It
we
could
go.
be like a TikTok show or something. Hey, wait a minute,
I've
that could
seen much
work.
worse
People love that
TikToks.
stuff. Like, that's a
That
great
could
idea.
work. Yeah. Wait a minute. We have something here.
Sateesh, tell us a little bit about funding models
Mm.
and even like where's the money going to come from for developing these tools, because a lot of these agencies, like as you said, like they don't have the money. The courts don't have the money. We do have people and organizations that have a lot of resources, whether that's funding and investment companies, whether that's big tech, whether that's big law, investment firms, where's the money going to come from in terms of, how are we going to get them to sort of redirect to impact the justice gap?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And one of the things that I've also learned in my 20 years working as a legal services lawyer is that the way we fund this work is broken. We rely on court systems, we rely on foundations, we rely on local communities and governments and charities to foot the bill for this incredibly time-consuming, important work. And they're never going to be able to do that effectively and properly. And so the
On
whole
long
system is
term
broken.
and
Yeah. Their
consistently.
priorities change. They want to chase some new idea or new toy, and it's extremely frustrating. And the result of that funding model is like anyone who works in the space is underpaid and they are overworked. And so the entire funding model is broken. And I see this from my own role as an executive director of a nonprofit, going door to door with my hat in my hand, asking very wealthy people for, a couple of $1,000s. It was demeaning. It was demoralizing. And it was never going to be enough to do the work that we want to do. And so I realized, recently, a couple of months ago, that there's a couple of ways that this could be different, right? One is, look at the way that tech companies are making money on AI and other tech, right? Our entire economy right now, our stock market is being propped up by like 7 big tech companies, right? That's the way things are going. They've never made more money. There've never been more billionaires in our country. And so what if we just taxed them and said, give us 0.01% of your annual profits? That would be billions of dollars. Literally, it would be 10 times more than all the money that we have now to fund these programs. And then you would ask, well, why would they do that? Well, one reason they would do that is they've already caused so much harm. They owe it to us, right? They've already poisoned our brains. Like we're already like killing time on their apps, and we're not reading books, and our elections are broken, and the way that we see the news is broken. There's so much damage, right? So they owe it to us. But the other reason is, they want to do good too. Like if they really believe that they're good for humanity, give us a tiny percentage of that money. And so if you think about like the big tech companies, their profits, each one of them made $100 billion in profit last year. Meta, Apple, Google, they're making so much money. So that's one way to do it. But the other way to do it, that's never going to happen, right? Like who's going to make them pay?
I was going to say, what's the next
I
one?
know, right? So let's just say that doesn't work out and we try our best. The other way is, well, what if we made these solutions available to people without the overhead of lawyers, law firms, nonprofits, bureaucracies, and so on? What if it's just an app, right? Would you pay $5 to get a legal problem that's been weighing on your mind for months resolved, or at least get pointed in the right direction? Would you pay the price of a slice of pizza, or a burrito at Chipotle, or a cup of coffee at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts to get an answer to a legal challenge that you've been facing? I think people would, right? But the problem is that kind of information is not available. And there's all these restrictions like the unauthorized practice of law and these barriers that exist. But if we overcome those and we give people that kind of help early enough before it's a legal problem, another thing that Susskind says is we should build fences at the top of the cliff, not ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. And these are fences at the top of the cliff, right, that keep people from having these crises that get much worse, and they're more expensive, and they have more impacts on all of us if they go badly. So if we do it that way, then these things fund themselves. And maybe that's a much healthier model. And we leave the legal nonprofits to do the really hard stuff, and they can use the money they have to focus on that stuff. And everybody else gets the help they need from, the Uber for law or the Airbnb for legal problem, whatever you want to call it. The simple app that does one thing well and answers your question, helps you fill out that form, and it costs no money. Maybe that's the way to go.
It's the legal service without lawyers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Satish, before we start to wrap this up, I'm curious with your new role with Tom Martin. What's your plan there? What do we expect to see out of you in the next 6 months or so?
Yeah, so Tom is so creative and supportive. And I think there are two ways that I hope to go forward. And I'm just speaking for myself here and not him or the company LawDroid. But one is to build more tools and to plug them in. The easy lift is to plug them into legal aids, to give people better intake tools, to build better websites with chatbots that the general public can interact with. And then they wouldn't be later in line at the intake office, right? There'd be less pressure on the orgs and more people would get help when they need it. And then the other way is like with lawanswers.ai, which is to be able to deliver people legal help independently of lawyers and legal aids, be able to make that work in a way that's accurate, efficient, within the boundaries of the law where people live, whether they're regulatory issues or other issues, and maybe make that a business model that is sustainable. And so these are the two ways that I hope to advance some of these ideas. But at the very least, the immediate things that we're going to be working on are building Depositron in other cities. So Depositron exists in New York City and for New York State because the laws are the same on security deposits. But why not in California or Illinois or Florida, Texas? Yeah, absolutely. And the
Help my
challenge in
son.
different places. Yeah, I mean, tell me if this is true, but in some states, the laws on this stuff are different county to county, and that becomes a little more challenging. Whereas in New York, the law is the same for the whole state. And so we have to overcome barriers like that. But it's not impossible. With the right local partners, this could be a real win-win for everybody involved, including the courts, who don't want to see these cases, right? The last thing they want is another deposit case that ties up the docket.
Well, Satish, before we get to the crystal ball question, we've been curious and been asking our guests, what resources do you go to just to keep up on top of all the changes that are going? It could be A to J, it could be tech, anything, what's your go-to resources?
Yeah, like surprisingly, the best place that I found is LinkedIn, just to learn about stuff and to connect with people. And what I found is like people are really open to talking and meeting and, you know, learning from each other on LinkedIn, sharing resources. So that's how I started. Is just like put my name out there. I started writing some stuff. People started asking me about it. And then like I end up on great podcasts like this and meeting folks like you guys in just a short period of time. The other place that I like to read a lot of stuff is Substack. There's a lot of people writing really kind of timely, topical stuff on Substack, and it's really helped me learn a lot more about this space. And then the third piece of it is a little harder, but to travel, to go to conferences and to actually talk to people outside of their slide decks and get the real deal, at a reception or a happy hour or an event or something like that. And there's so many people, but also there aren't that many people. Both of those things are true. Like the legal tech world is pretty small. And I was really happy to see that, when you start going out and meeting people, it's a lot of the same people that you see and you form relationships and they introduce you to other people and everybody's kind of on the same page and they're moving this thing forward. So it's been really fun to do that. So that's the way I've done it. And there's obviously more academic ways to do it too, and read, the scholarly articles and the books by people like Richard Susskind and others. What's the name of the guy from Penn who wrote Co-Intelligent? Ethan Mollick.
Ethan
But
Mollick.
people like that who just write such really brilliant, thoughtful pieces that open your eyes a little bit more to the point where you can apply that stuff to the work that you're doing every day.
So now we are at the crystal ball question,
Okay.
which we ask everybody in terms of, looking into the future. And I know we have talked a lot already about like some future forward ideas, but I will sort of ask you to reach into yourself a little bit more and see, what sort of changes or challenges you see sort of in the near future that we, and I'll use we broadly, but feel free to say, who you mean by we. What do we need to prepare for now? What
I
groundwork
think,
do we need to lay?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think as somewhat of a skeptic, I'm afraid that the legal market is going to crash at some point. That, the way that we've delivered legal help or legal services, both like private and public, is broken. The billable hour is outdated. And when people start understanding how much AI tools can do, you think about clients, corporate clients, their in-house teams using AI are going to be questioning why they're hiring big law, right? Why do we need them? Like we can do this stuff on our own. And so that trickle down is going to impact everyone from partners, associates, in-house counsel to law students. And I think if I was a law student right now, I'd be terrified. And I tell people I know who are in law school, like, you got to really open your eyes now because they're not telling you what's coming. They're hiding the ball from you and they're teaching you the same old crap, pardon my French, and it's not going to help you because it's going to be irrelevant, right? And you're going to be in debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I think that reckoning is going to come and it's going to clear the field. And then we have to rebuild. And how do we rebuild it? We got to think about different ways to deliver services. We got to become more specialists or more generalized. Like, I don't know which one it's going to be. It's going to be one or the other. Like lawyers are going to be able to do a lot of different things using AI tools, or they're going to focus on very specific things that only they can do as humans, right? Maybe both of those things are going to be the opposite poles of the legal market. And there's a lot of people in the middle. I'm worried. I don't know what's going to happen to them. I mean, a lot of law students looking for jobs. I'm worried about them too. But, this reckoning has been coming for a long time because the system doesn't work. Like there's no good way to justify the way things work now. So maybe this is the best way, unfortunately. So that's my prediction. Let's see what happens.
Oh, definitely need to bring you back at some point and play this part back
When
to
everything
you.
collapses, we'll bring you back.
Right. I'll be under a bridge and
We will.
All right. Well, Sateesh Nori, thank you very much for coming in and talking with us. It's been great to have kind of this human side of the legal innovation discussion. So thank you very much.
thank you. This has been a real pleasure.
And thanks to all of you, our listeners, for taking the time to listen to the Geek and Review podcast. If you enjoy the show, please share it with a colleague. We'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn, TikTok, or Blue Sky.
And Satish, for the listeners who want to read more about your on your Substack or learn more about the projects that you're working on, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Sateesh Nori. My Substack is called The Augmented Lawyer. I also have a book coming out called The Augmented Lawyer in the next couple of months, published by the
Nice.
ABA. So stay tuned.
And as always, the music you hear is from Jerry David DeSica. Thank you very much, Jerry.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Bye, everyone.
Bye.